Earlier today, we started with disruption, we moved into science and media, and we're now about to move into disruption and science. We talked about the red planet. Now we're actually going to have something around asteroids, and it's going to be very cool. I checked this out earlier, but without further ado, let's bring to the stage JC Oliver, Global Head of Innovation for Microsoft, or Innovation Ninja, whichever you prefer.
Innovation Ninja, we're going to do Innovation Ninja. Can you hear me? Am I coming through? Right, we're started already. Thank you for not attending the tennis. I just saw Boris Becker outside and Venus Williams. Not Venus, what's her sister? So it's good, you're in here. It's not as exciting as those guys. Right, I am JC Oliver, as you can see, Innovation Ninja. I keep doing that. I don't know whether it goes down well. But my job is to essentially understand what goes on at Microsoft, all the cool technologies we've got, and what we can do to then munge that together with brands to come up with some really interesting stuff, experiences, etc. And so part of what we do is understanding what the technology can do and then how we communicate and tell that story. So today I'm going to take you through about how you might potentially die. Or hopefully we're going to save mankind. I was supposed to do this with my colleague Rick Webb, but unfortunately he got killed by a meteor on the way here. No, he didn't. He just got stuck in LA. So obviously when we're talking about such big, death-defying experiences and things, we're going to start off with a very provocative video that's going to get you very scared and excited at the same time. Okay, I think you're sufficiently scared. Did you see the guy reading the paper? He didn't even look around. He was just like, I'm just reading the headlines, and then tsunami takes over. So you would probably recognize that as the 1997 movie Deep Impact. Hollywood, as they always, and I don't know why this happens, but they always have movies in pairs. So in 1997, there was this amazing movie, Armageddon. And the challenge that we've got that I want to talk to you about today is how asteroids will potentially kill us. And what Microsoft, what the Open Space Agency, and what NASA are going to do about that. So the title of this is The Power of Story and How We Can Leverage Technology to Save Mankind. And what's interesting about Hollywood, I was watching another 1997 movie. I don't know why I keep watching movies in 1997, but Enemy of the State with Will Smith. And if you watch that movie today, what you realize is that the technology that they use in that movie actually seems quite real today, like, you know, sort of mobile phones that track where you go, sensors in shoes. But in 1997, it was like, what? You know, people wondered how that could potentially happen. So I had this little theory around how Hollywood always tends to be about 20 years ahead. And what's interesting about fiction is it tends to be more predictive of the future than non-fiction, because you have to have more imagination and you have to try harder to ground it in reality. And the great thing about Hollywood is it gets us to the movies and it gets us to learn all these stories, but it's almost a success despite itself. Because what you're all sitting here at the moment thinking is, that whole stuff that happened in 97, that will never happen, right? It's all about Hollywood bombast and it's all about Hollywood hyperbole. And it's great, but really, this stuff is happening, and it's happening now nearly 20 years later, and we really have to be concerned about it. So I want to talk to you about that today. But let's think about story before I get into that. I don't know why I'm looking at myself. I'm going to look down here. The interesting thing about the Hollywood formula is that it works in 3 acts. And you normally have Act 1, you meet the protagonist, there's some type of antagonist that comes in, upsets the equilibrium, they go through some change, and then at the end there's some type of climax. The way, this 3-act structure, the beginning, middle, and end, is the way that we tell stories. It's very successful, and brands have taken that on. What brands are not very successful at is understanding plot. So we talk about storytelling all the time, but do we talk about actually understanding how brands can tell plot? And there's a couple of things when you think about plot. One is called a MacGuffin. I want you to remember that word, because a MacGuffin is a device that drives the narrative along. It tends to normally be some type of prop. It's what the French call the mise en scène. It's some type of prop that drives the narrative along, keeps you interested, but then gets you to a narrative point which then takes you to somewhere else. So it's a device that keeps your attention. Remember that, because we're going to talk about that today. The other term in narratives are fabulons sujets. It's a very strange term. I don't know where this comes from, but this is about creating the story in the mind's eye of the audience. So just like brands, you don't own your brand, the audience owns your brand. They create the brand in their own mind. That's what you do with the Hollywood narrative, and it's called the fabulons sujet. So I kind of then crudely took the 3-act structure and then tried to align this to how we've told stories throughout time. So at the Act 1, Act 2, we kind of had early drawings and the spoken word, and then the written word. I've been crude here, guys, as you can see. Act 2 to Act 3, traditional media, and then digital media. And the great thing about where we are now is that the way that we interact with stories is much more non-linear, much more interactive. But is that the end? Possibly not. I think we're probably going to go on and understand how we tell stories in different ways, how we communicate, how we unpack that. And a brand that I just recently worked on is this one with Virgin Atlantic over Christmas. We unpacked their brand. We merged technology and the physical space of an aeroplane to tell the brand story in a really interesting way. We created the first 5D experience in flight. And Santa, as you can see here, actually turned up on flight. He was an actor, but the way that brands are telling their stories is really interesting, and putting humans at the very center and understanding how we tell those is new and key. And so I kind of came up with this theory around Act 1 was about yelling, right? We always used to yell our stories. Who shouted the loudest normally got the most amount of audience. Then we started to understand telling. Today, we're getting into making stories. So stories where the audience come and help us make. And the girl from Storyful really touched on this, how your audience comes in and makes. So we've gone from yelling to telling to making. And this leads me into where we are today, certainly with our audience. So some digital trends research we ran at Microsoft. It's actually really good research, generic, talks about 8 digital trends that we look at today. And we've run it over the last couple of years, some quant and qual research. One of the things that came out and is very strong for me is the creator culture. So a lot of the millennials now love to build their own things. They are garage tinklers or tinkerers or whatever you want to call them. There are Arduino board masters who are tinkering and building stuff. I heard the other day that Google have even stopped looking at people's qualifications. They just ask you what you've built and what you've created. We are in that creator culture, and it is very much part of how we need to engage people moving forward. But the problem we have is that technology is not sexy. We all know that. There is no emotional engagement with technology. And so what we have to do is try and imbue this emotion and try and create a story around what is essentially quite a boring piece of tech. And what I say to all my guys at work is we need to do more of technology understanding about humans rather than humans understanding about technology. It's about putting humans at the center of our design thinking and creating the story around that rather than using technology at the very center. However, Microsoft has been trying to do a very good job in this, and I'm going to show you a quick ad that we released at the Super Bowl last year because it still touches me and pulls on my little heartstrings.
What is technology? What can it do?
When I lost my eyesight, I thought that my painting days were over.
How far can we go?
By using your hands, you can actually control your X-ray.
Technology has the power to unite us.
Hang on, honey. Hang on.
There he is. You see him?
I can see him.
It inspires us. Technology has taken us places we've only dreamed.
Now I can do whatever I want.
It gives hope to the hopeless.
So your device is on. Can you hear me talking?
and it has given voice to the voiceless.
Fantastic. I actually forgot about that ad. I was in Los Angeles last week, and the guy from Nike was on before me, and he showed all these amazing ads which make your back of the hairs on the back of your neck stand on there. And I showed that, and actually the crowd were like, that's as good as a Nike ad. And it's fabulous, actually, because, you know, what's great is how what we're trying to do with technology, how we're trying to tell stories, leads me into the project that we're working on, which I think tells the Microsoft brand in new and authentic ways, but also allows us to do something really true and real using real people. So let me get into that. So I'm going to add a little bit of narrative verve and juice here. So NASA phoned us up and said, Microsoft, we have a problem. They did. It wasn't in that sense, but but NASA came to us and to the Open Space Agency, and they do have a problem. And the problem is we're going to die from asteroids. As the metropolitan areas grow, as we go from 7 billion to 10 billion people, the likelihood of getting hit by an asteroid is more likely by 2020 than you dying in a plane crash, right? Just think about that again. By 2020, you're more likely to get hit by an asteroid than dying in a plane crash. That's quite crazy. And the problem we've got is that all these asteroids exist in this galaxy far, far away, but they're all on this trajectory. And as we all know, I've had an extra slide in there, and they're all far away, and they're coming to, and they're going to hit us at some point. So I got a call from the Queen, not this Queen, but this Queen, and I actually am good friends with Roger May's son, Rupert, and he put me in touch with Brian May, and Brian May told me about he's the spokesperson for Asteroid Day. And I don't know whether you guys know Asteroid Day. I didn't at the time. It's on the 30th of June this year. It is, and as it says here, a global movement to protect Earth from asteroids. And this exists. This is going to be happening this year. There was a Channel 4 program on, if you're from the UK, a couple of weeks ago about how we're going to die. Dying from asteroids was like number 3 or 4, right? So it's big, it's coming, it's there. What are we doing about it? We all know that the T-Rex and the dinosaurs died from an asteroid hitting the Earth. This was a big mofo of a meteor. This took out a whole load of dinosaurs, but the dinosaurs died from the ash cloud that then eventually formed, and the sun couldn't penetrate through. So whilst big meteors kill a lot of people, it's what happens after. But don't worry about that, because we know where those big meteors are. So we're okay with the big ones that killed the T-Rex. What we're not so good at is identifying the smaller ones that could take out a town or a city block or your car or you. We don't know where they are. We don't know that they exist, but we know that they are out there and they could potentially be heading this way. This is a video. I'm going to talk over the top of this just if you can keep the volume down. This is a video from Chelyabinsk in Russia in 2013. This was an asteroid that actually broke through the atmosphere. You can see it there. There's a number of different videos that you'll see as I talk over the top here. This took out a building, killed a couple of people. The thermonuclear blast effects of this for people that didn't have sunglasses on, and why would you in Chelyabinsk, Russia? I'm sure the sun doesn't shine that much there. The people that actually looked at it burnt the retinas out in their eyeballs. There is a huge, off the Richter scale in terms of now the quake it had, and there's a huge amount of nuclear activity that exists just from this. So it happens more often than we care to realize, and it has over the last 50 years. What we've now seen from the Freedom of Information Act from the US Navy is that what's happened in the past is that asteroids have landed in the sea, caused mini tsunamis, but no one ever told us about it. And again, as metropolitan areas grow, the likelihood that these are going to land on a metropolitan area is very high. So there's a big problem. That's what it did, took out this factory. So it is a problem, and it is going to affect us. So the White House set the challenge to NASA and said, we need to understand what are the big things that are going to kill mankind. Just a small question that Obama does over his coffee, excuse me. And one of them is going to be asteroids, as I think I've made clear. Now, the problem that NASA have got is that NASA asked for more money. And Obama turns around and says, look, we've got a few problems here. I don't know whether we can give you more money. Congress won't serve it over. And what can we do about this? So a guy at NASA called Jason Kessler, amazing guy, thought, well, let's socialize this and create what we're called now citizen science. How can we get citizens in the world to be part of, or kind of be a quasi-NASA person, and try and understand how we can fulfill and work on this big asteroid problem? Not the really big ones, but how we can become part of the solution to this big challenge. So the Open Space Agency, and this guy here called James Parr, really lovely guy who's based down in Vauxhall in London, he worked with Jason, and Jason decided to create a hack fest at NASA and invite a load of design agencies to come up with some ideas. And so James, who wanted to be an astronaut when he was younger, but as claustrophobia and as a fear of confined spaces kind of stops you from being an astronaut, thought this is a great way that we can try and design space exploration from Earth, and was a way for him to get in. So we came up with this idea, he came to us and we came up with this idea about creating this asteroid challenge lab. And this struck me as a big challenge because number one, it was a tech problem, right? We've got a tech problem in trying to create something that we've got to put in people's hands. The other one is that we have a comms problem. How do we get over the giggle factor of people watching Deep Impact and Armageddon and going, this just isn't true? So if you think about what we needed to do, there was NASA and the big problem we've got, that's the one. We've then, the other 9% of people, we need to get fully engaged. And the other 90% of people, so the 1-9-90 rule in social media, the other 90% of people we need to make aware of it. Because unless you're aware of it, you're never going to be part of the 9% that wants to actually do something, and you're never going to be part of the 1% that is actually going to do something. So I kind of came at this from two areas, and we thought about this. One is a comms problem, the second is a tech problem. And this is both a hardware and a software problem, which is why Microsoft is absolutely key in trying to solve this. So the idea we came up with was, how do we create a way that we can put technology across the world to aggregate what we're seeing in the skies and send that back to NASA? So we all know the fact that the mobile phone today has more power in it than what put the man on the moon. And so we thought, everyone has a phone, and phones today have great optics. And the best optic on the market when we came up with this idea was the Nokia Lumia 1020. Had a 41 megapixel camera and had a floating lens. It was you'd never use a 41 megapixel camera for taking pictures of your mates, but we thought this could be a great way to slot this into a machine of some kind that we didn't have to distribute, that you could 3D print and you could place above your house or above your school, and you could look into the night sky, and by aggregating that data in a really easy way, we could create a product cloud that we could then create an engine around, filter that data, send back to NASA so we could track the asteroids. And that's exactly what we did. And the idea we came up with, and that James's team came up with and came to us with, is called the Ultrascope. This is an automated mini observatory, effectively. You can 3D print most of what you see there. The one thing that you can't 3D print is the optical mirror that sits in the middle. At the moment, it's 8 inches big. And if you've got a telescope, obviously it's all based around optics. And so you need to laser print that. But effectively what we did was we said, let's create a package where we can send this out, we can send out the template to people, they can 3D print their own Ultrascope. We can then send them the mirror, and because anyone's got phone, and the phone, by the way, can be calibrated to any phone. Could be an iPhone, could be a Samsung. The reason why they came to us is because of our device expertise in optics in the Lumia 1020, but also because of what we can do in the cloud. So we started seeding this. We started working on it, creating it, sending it out. We created our own hack. We got 1,600 teams come back to us and start building this and start working on how we can make it better, because we need to get to a 20-inch optical mirror, and so we needed help hacking the hardware, but also hacking the UX and getting people to understand how to make it happen, because you can plug a phone in, but if you're an amateur asteroid hunter, or you just want to find out what's going on in the galaxy, you may be savvy, you may be technically savvy, but you might not be computer literate in UX. So we had to create a very easy to understand UX that people could just put on. You could look into the skies with this, and the pictures, the fidelity on it is absolutely amazing. You could then send that data back, work on that data, send it back. And so we created this whole program, but we needed software hackers, we needed hardware hackers, we needed people who could understand comms in order to build out this challenge and get this to a place where people would overcome this giggle factor. And so this is kind of how it works. This is a schematic we put together. So in the far left, the MPC, these are the big telescopes that we've got in the Northern Hemisphere. And by the way, the Northern Hemisphere, we've got a lot of money where we can track a lot of the asteroids. In the Southern Hemisphere, we don't have a lot. So a lot of this was to be focused around Africa in the southern skies in the Southern Hemisphere to pick up the size of the meteors and how they move, how they track. Also, by the way, and you probably didn't know this, I didn't know at the time, but meteors and asteroids are incredibly wealthy in rich earth minerals. So these are worth like $5 billion. And there's actually a website you can go to where you can see the asteroids that they've tracked and they've identified how much they're worth. Some of them are worth 5 to 7 billion just based on the rich minerals that they've got into them. So you think about, as we move forward in the next 5 to 10 years, you'll be having rockets going up, potentially blowing these asteroids up or taking the minerals from them and coming back to sell them. Anyway, I slightly digress. So we would aggregate this information into the product cloud, and we would then put it through one of our engines, give it back to NASA so they could do some stuff with it. As I mentioned, at the moment we're very amateur. We've got the Explorer, which is on the bottom left. That's the Ultrascope Explorer. We need to get to the Odyssey, which is the bigger machine on the right-hand side. This is a 20-inch optical mirror lens, and that's when we're going to start to really see some transformative change in citizens as scientists really delivering on solving this solution with us and the Open Space Agency and NASA. So that's where we're getting to. I went and pitched this at the Microsoft garage. So we've got a garage in Seattle. They've given us a building, and you've got, there's a lot of nerds down there. I'm not going to lie to you. But we've given them a space, we've given them the tools, we've given them the platforms. They go in there at their own time. I've actually started to negotiate with the guy that runs it to take brands. So if you've got a brand challenge and no one else can help, maybe you can hire them, the A Garage at Microsoft. And I went and pitched it to these guys. They loved it. So I've got a bunch of nerdy guys working on this at the moment. They're building out the hardware. They're building out the UX because we've got a lot of those people. And one of the guys, Matt, said to me, JC, you should come down on Thursdays. I was like, why Thursdays? Like, you get free beer? He goes, no, it's late night Thursdays. And I was like, what happens late night Thursdays? He's like, well, we work late. That's the type of guys we've got. So we've got, so the garage is working on it. They're just ruminating and pontificating and coming up with ways to transmogrify what we've got into something that we need. We've had a lot of press. Engadget promoted what we were doing with these guys. So we're developing the story on the communications front. And then last week, I was in Los Angeles. There you can see me on the right-hand side with the guys from Nokia, with James Parr. And you can see the Ultrascope on stage there. Like, amazing. He, like, literally, I'm not kidding you, it's like a baby or a puppy. He just put it on the side, and everybody, like loads of women, were just coming up saying, hi, how are you? What is this? It was quite funny. We told some people it was a hangover kit, that you put it around your mouth and it pulled, yeah, anyway. So we're working with Fast Company at the moment, and I decided that we'd do a couple of workshops at an event we ran last week, which was called the Creative Counter Conference. So we had a lot of disruptors there, a lot of creators, a lot of innovators, and I ran 3 workshops, and it was all based around a communications architecture. So how do we overcome that giggle factor? It was amazing. We had people from the Oprah Winfrey Network, we had people from Fast Company, we had people from Funny or Die. It's amazing to see what creators think about how we have to overcome this problem. And the end goal we gave them was the front cover of Fast Company. So what would your headline be in getting this through? And it's amazing. When you do these communication sprints, like it was only 15 minutes. Like the workshops in total were half an hour, but the sprint was actually only 15 minutes. The ideas that came out of it were absolutely amazing. And I guess it's good that you can do it in Los Angeles, but it was fantastic. So again, working out, you don't have to think up too much. You probably all got ideas in your head about how, as marketers, we can communicate this problem, but we got some fantastic ideas out of that. And in fact, we're in concert with Fast Company in something we've got called Create Good. So we launched this last week in LA, and we're asking people to submit their causes that are close to their heart. And we're going to pick 3 of them. We're going to fly the winners to Cannes, at our beach club in Cannes, for the Cannes Lions at the end of June. And we're going to grab the creative community. We've asked all of the big agencies to submit 1 hour of their time to come and work on these causes. So we're going to shake the mind grapes of all of the creative community, squeeze out the juices to work on these particular causes. And I'm going to be talking about about the Ultrascope with Jason Kessler. Jason will be in Cannes. And so if you feel like you want to take part in this, just submit a cause, any cause. Just tweet me at JCOllie and I'll send you the link. You just have to say what you're into. Like this is something that I'm into, but obviously it aligns with my job and with what Microsoft want to say. But please, if you're interested and you're going to Cannes, and even if you're not, this is a good way to win a trip. So just to wrap up, what I've learned from this challenge is, it's all about the evolution of storytelling into story making. We've gone from yelling to telling to making, and as brands, we really need to understand how we make rather than tell, because you have to understand what the audience wants, you have to understand how to use the Ultrascope as the MacGuffin, because the Ultrascope is just a way to get you into citizen science, and how to get that evolution of that story played out. So make, don't tell, hack. I know everyone talks about hack and it's become kind of hackneyed. It's become kind of quite cliched, but true hacks, true understanding of getting really creative people in a room trying to understand a challenge in a very short space of time has been monumental in my understanding of how we as a brand tell our story. And part of what came out of that is that real people and real stories are absolutely key. So seeding people with a below-the-line activity that gives them empowerment, and then amplifying that empowerment with our above-the-line, just like you saw in the ad that we gave earlier. That girl who started crying with the tattoos on her arm, that was a piece of technology that we implanted into her ear, and that was the first time that she'd ever heard sound. So, getting real people with authentic stories really is truly aligned to what we feel Microsoft as a brand wants to achieve. Think about it from a utility perspective. Create good. We're thinking about how we're going to save mankind. I know that sounds really bombastic and crazy, but that's essentially what we're doing with this. But unless we get the comms architecture play right, unless we get the creative right, people just giggle at you. People just go, yeah, I saw that movie in 1997, Deep Impact, and that's ever going to happen. And it is, and we do have to try and solve it. So entertain as well as utility, and then finally, just get involved and take part. There's a lot of brands that sit back and a lot of people that sit back and just go, right, well, someone else is going to do that. We looked at this from our problem. We said, look, this aligns to our brand virtues. This aligns to what Microsoft wants to do. We've got the capabilities, we've got the concepts, and we've got the consumption platforms to build out that media across Xbox and Skype and MSN and things like that. We have everything at our disposal. This is something that we should feel, and that I feel personally strong about, that we should dive in on. So take part. And just think about it from your imagination. We all have the power in our hands, literally in our hands, because we've got all the phones. All you need to do is download and print the Ultrascope, and you can be part of citizen science. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you, JC. That was good. And you finished all your slides.
What do you mean that was good? Like you were questioning me.
That's the first time. Fantastic.
Thank you,
very
mate.
much.
Thank you.
I suppose one question I have is, you talk about the brands and them going into the story making, start the yelling, start telling. Yeah. How many brands, in your opinion, do you think are getting that right now?
Well, it was interesting what the girl from Story 4 was talking about, because I think a lot of brands understand it, but not a lot of brands are applying it. So, I talked at the top of this around about the way brands are formed in people's minds is their own narrative. And the quicker that brands understand that they don't create their story anymore, they create act one of their story, the corollary of how that narrative plays out, act 2 and 3, is all in the consumer's mind or in the audience's mind. So you have to give over and let them feed back in and feed you back the story. I think brands get it, but they're just not applying it because there's old thinking, there's legacy thinking. But as you're getting younger people coming to organizations and you're getting more human-centric design thinking and more crazy tech people work out how we solve brand issues, I think you're going to see more and more of it.
Brilliant. And shall we take one from the audience as we're here? Anyone got a question here? This will be the last science-related
Any potential asteroid hunters? No, they're all bewildered. No. Well, look, you're not going to die today, I hope, unless you drink too much tonight. But
yes, well, hopefully not.
Yeah, exactly.
But, thank you very much, JC. It's a big round of applause. Thank you very much. Cheers.